Thank you so much, Melissa, for joining our first ever webinar with Habits Us. It's such a privilege to have you here as an industry expert. And yeah, thank you again. Today's topic will be going from data to impact and how key innovators in the sustainability fashion tech world are changing and evolving the way we buy fashion and we consume fashion as end consumers. And as I mentioned, today's guest speaker is Melissa from Impact Bites and Project Cece. She's the co-founder. And yeah, Melissa, it would be great to get an intro, learn a little bit about you, your background, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much for having me. Super exciting to be the first guest. So my name is Melissa. I've been working on Project Cece for quite a long time. Project Cece kind of started out of our own needs. I myself, I used to be a huge shopaholic, and then I watched the documentary The True Cost, and then I learned about all the things that were happening behind the brands that I knew in the fashion industry. So I learned about how people are being treated in the industry, but also the pollution that comes with it. And I was kind of shocked that with something I was doing like for fun, that I was supporting brands' unethical behavior. So I went online and I found so many beautiful brands and who make really nice items in a fair and sustainable way. And but they were just so small. So like I was being used to going to Zalando and have everything in one place. And when I wanted to shop sustainably, I had to like do my own research every single time I wanted to shop something. And then I was discussing this with my sister and co-founder, and she was like, "Well, I can build a website that just like collects all these items in one place." And that's how we launched with Project Cece.
Wow, isn't that crazy? They always say, isn't it, the best products are actually comes from the actual founder's needs and desperation for something.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's so interesting because yeah, now you guys must be using it on a day-to-day basis for your own needs. And I'm guessing all the Christmas shopping is also happening on Project CC.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Like, I'm super inspired as well because we launched a very long time ago. Like in 2016, we launched with an MVP. So that's almost 10 years.
Wow.
And I would expect that in those 10 years, at some point, you would have, like, I don't know all the brands. But even up until this day, we keep on discovering so many great brands doing really cool stuff. So yeah, we're really impressed with how much cool brands are out there.
Oh, that's amazing. That's so nice to hear. And yeah, speaking of kind of your origin story and your personal background, yours and Marcella, your co-founder, I guess the first question comes back to kind of that original pain point and what was that initial problem. I know you mentioned, you had a personal frustration, but yeah, what was that frustration and how did that necessarily bridge its way into you creating that product, which was Impact Bites and Project CC at the same time? How did that happen?
Yeah, so I think so. After I watched the documentary, The True Cost, I did like a whole year of not shopping. So a no buy here. I went cold turkey, couldn't buy anything. And I think for me that was really good. But then I learned that H&M actually had like a conscious collection. So I was like, well, maybe I can go here and, shop something nice. So I went there and I bought a lot of things. And I remember like there was written on the wall, we unite our workers, or we promote our workers to unite in unions. So I was like, okay, this place, it's not as bad as it used to be. Mm-hmm. And then I went home and I saw another scandal where H&M was involved in. And I was like, even when a brand says they are sustainable, it's actually like there are so many layers to it.
Yeah.
So I think that was also something we tried to tackle with Project Cece. So on the one hand, it was discovering these brands who did more in terms of ethics, but also in terms of environmental friendliness, but also like to make it super easy to understand like what exactly they were doing. So when we started out, we did, so there was a third co-founder as well, Noor. Noor and me, we did like a whole year of research on what sustainability means in the fashion industry, because I think especially in the fashion industry, sustainability can be used for so many different things. So sometimes a brand says it's sustainable because it's durable, and sometimes they only mean like the eco-friendly part, but then it's, yeah, sometimes they refer to the fair wages. So it has like so many topics that you can attach to sustainability. So the first year was just a huge deep dive on what sustainability exactly means in the fashion industry, and trying to see if we could make that more easy to understand for people. This is why we also came up with these 5 bucket terms for sustainability. So for each brand that we onboard, we do like this research on what exactly they are doing related to those topics.
Yeah, so it's kind of in a unified place, all the sustainability claims that the brands are making, that consumers can then just go and trust a little bit more and a lot more as data keeps evolving than the mainstream marketplaces, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah. So what we're really trying to do, so what you've seen over the past years is that a lot of platforms now have like this sustainability checkbox. What we really try to do with Project Cece is not to only give like the checkbox mark, but also tell you exactly, like in a blink of an eye, this is what a brand does in terms of sustainability.
That's really cool. That's so needed, and yeah, it's so inspiring to hear. You know, it was almost 10 years ago. This moment of frustration and this spark, and it's now a concrete idea, not just an idea but a product, and you've got more than I think 350 brands on there, which is amazing. And it's a big there's definitely a big gap in the market for it, and it's so great to see you guys strive forward in that, for sure. And I guess that also links to the next question is, you know, like you mentioned, you were, you know, doing that deep dive, you learned a little bit more about, you know, the different practices behind H&M as a case example, as a poster child. And then I guess my question is, was that a moment where you realized that the market or the industry lacked transparency and trustworthiness, or was that later on as you were discovering more brands? When did you realize that there was real, you know, that real lack of transparency in the fashion industry?
I think it's been a very gradual process in that sense. So of course there was this moment with H&M where I really was confronted that what they were saying was not true in all cases. Like maybe it was true for some cases, but not in all. And I think by building Project Cece, we learned a lot from the industry. So I think what really helped us was that when we launched the website, we also started with weekly blogging. So we would dive into topics related to sustainability in the fashion industry and really dive really deep into specific angles. So like it could be about materials, it could be about countries where there are a lot of production facilities, it could be about the dyes that are being used, it could be about vegan materials that are often being hailed as like the sustainable alternative to leather, but often it's just basically plastic. So during that research and during that whole period of building Project Cece, we encountered so many layers of sustainability in the fashion industry that that it made the problem more visible to us. That it's not that brands are not as transparent as they not only pretend they are, but often also like as they think they are. So, for example, what we also notice is when a brand reaches out to be on our platform, often they think they are producing in a pretty good way. But then when we send out our impact analysis, then sometimes they don't have a lot of information available. So we know then what follow-up questions to ask. And then sometimes it happens that a brand can't answer them and actually has to go back to to the negotiations with their suppliers to learn more about what is happening in the factories.
Yeah, and it's almost, you don't know what you don't know. So you might think that
Yeah,
in a certain pillar of
yeah,
sustainability you're doing great, but you actually, it takes a
yeah,
lot of money, time, resources to actually deep dive into that pillar, whether that's fair wages,
absolutely.
look at industry standards, and then figure out where you're matched against that.
Yeah,
And a lot of the
definitely.
small to medium brands don't have that resources and don't have that capability and time. So that's
No,
super cool that you're able to offer that as well as a
yeah.
service.
Yeah, I also think that sustainability over the past years has evolved a lot. So before it was really about, we saw a lot of people who also watched the TrueCast and then were like, okay, I want to make this fashion industry more sustainable. So I'm going to start this basic t-shirt brand, creating t-shirts from organic cotton. And of course, it is good to have alternatives to like less eco-friendly materials, but yeah, there's also the case of overproduction, and I think that has been more visible over the past year. So a lot of people are now being more critical on brands in general, like, okay, but what are the numbers you're producing, and how are you handling your waste? So I think there's like the conversation on sustainability has really evolved from just focusing on the type of materials you're using to a more holistic approach on like the impact you have as a brand.
Yeah, such good insight to have as well, definitely. And I think that leads me perfectly on to the next question, which I have for you, which I always ask people because the answers are always so different. And that is, in your opinion, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions when it comes to sustainable fashion? I'm sure you must have heard a lot, both from consumers, brands.
Mhm.
It'd be really cool to understand, yeah, what you think are the biggest misconceptions.
So I think there's two. So on the one hand, I think for me personally, like maybe going back to my personal experience, was that I thought sustainable fashion is about what you buy more than how you buy. So going back to my example of being a shopaholic, then stopping shopping for a whole year, then go to the H&M, and then I discovered secondhand platforms, and then I was like, this is amazing because it's super cheap and I could just
Yeah.
spend so much money and buy so many new clothes at like the same pace I was used to at fast fashion, but then also feel good about myself. But then I noticed that, especially on Vinted, where you can't put like the country filter, that I was ordering stuff from all over the world and
Yeah.
packages were being sent. Like for me individually, that would have quite an impact on the environment, and maybe even more if you would just buy it new in a store. So yeah, that was for me a wake up call that sustainability in fashion is not only about what you buy, but also very, very, very much about how you buy and how often you buy, and the addiction part of it. And then the second misconception that I encounter a lot still is that sustainable fashion is very expensive. And I think on the one hand, yes, it's a switch. Like if you're used to Primark prices and you're going on our platform, it is a switch. Like it
It is a
is
big
an
difference.
investment.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then, if you look at the price you pay per wear, so the cost
Yeah.
per wear, which is something we really, really enjoy looking at, is like when you spread it. Like if you're able to wear a product for a very long amount of time, then you can like the cost you have per wear is so much lower than if it's just of bad quality or fast fashion. So I think that's a misconception, and also, related to that is that there's a lot of people are like, yeah, but then I'm just gonna spend a lot of like buy luxury brands or high end brands, because then for sure it is sustainable. But yeah, last week we had another case of Gucci being involved in these scandals. So even spending a lot of money on fashion doesn't make it sustainable. It's really about how you buy, and then about what you buy, and looking into like, okay, so what can this brand tell me about how they produce and what materials they're using. So it's I
Yeah,
think that's the
yeah. Yeah, definitely. And from we've experienced this as well when we're interviewing brands and talking to them from Have It Sus to their they say, I mean, you can't compare the margins that we're making to a Primark or a H&M. It's just we're not even technically in the same industry because what
yeah
we're creating is 5 items of one
yeah
line and making sure that it's sourced correctly, making sure that it's, we think about the end of life, the circularity aspect, and so many different pieces that for that
yeah
10 pieces of clothing, there's so much higher margins compared to a mass-produced 10,000 garment
yeah
retailer. So it's definitely a big difference and something that I, as a consumer myself, something that I use to justify when I'm buying as well, similar to you, is to say, okay, this is going to last in my wardrobe for 5 years, and the durability is this, and the quality is that, so
yeah
I can justify that increase. And I think a lot more consumers are making those. I mean, there's a TikTok recently that goes around with girl mats, or
yeah
but now it's becoming sustainability mats, and a lot more people are actually thinking of that, which is really really encouraging.
yeah
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, definitely. I think that's super, like, it's for me personally, it really helped me to switch from that overconsumption to, to dare to invest in pieces that would last with me. And it, really make me reconsider how I'm looking at my clothes. Like, I would really now, when I buy something new, I view it as an investment, and like something you want to cherish, and it feels more special than when you just buy a random second jeans that you
yeah,
already have.
yeah. Definitely agreed. Definitely agreed. And I'd like to move on to the next question, which is a little bit more around scaling ethical technology or scaling sustainable technology, because that also comes with a lot of caveats in
Yeah.
the industry. And the question we have is, what has been the hardest challenges, or what have been the hardest challenges operationally or technically in scaling a platform like yours? Obviously, when you have a few brands to start with and you're doing a pioneer or a test, it's quite easy to think about the consequences of technology, of AI. However, as you're scaling, has there been any challenges that you had to consciously think of as co-founders, to make sure that you as a platform were also being as ethical and as considerate, conscious as possible?
Definitely. I think, especially with Project Cece, we had quite some tough conversations there, and we took a not so basic route in many cases. So an example that we have is, we were very much, trying to be as sensitive as possible with privacy, for example. So instead of Google Analytics, we use an open source alternative, to make sure that, like, we don't support Google, even though they are doing like good stuff with like their Black Founder funds and startup funds, but still, like, we don't want to give them even more data. So there we chose to host an open source alternative. But on that note as well, especially related to scaling, was that you have, of course, the big platforms online where you can reach people in a very efficient way. So that's Instagram advertisement, Facebook advertisement, Google advertisements. And we did test out those platforms, but it's quite hard. Yeah, you have to you have to decide where you want to be in the customer's journey, on when you want to reach them, because they have so much data. You can really say, like, target people with a high intent to buy something, or even though they are not, like, they wouldn't be interested to shop otherwise. And I think what we really created for us, or not created, but what's the word? Yeah, wrote down for ourselves before we launched our campaigns was like, okay, who do we want to reach, and what is the goal? And I think what we did really well was that we tried to move away from these big platforms as much as we could. So we didn't want to do unnecessary advertisements. But then, for example, if people are already Googling for jeans or for t-shirts, then it's very interesting if we can pop up. Because then instead of them shopping at brands that are not as sustainable, we are able to redirect them to brands that are actually producing in a less harming way. So that's really decisions we made when setting up our campaigns. And then on that note, the second thing that we noticed was that was 2022. We saw more and more competitors pop up for Project Cece. So that's on the consumer side. There were a lot of people or platforms kind of in the same niche, trying to help consumers get connected to more sustainable brands. And these competitors were actually raising millions. So we were like, okay, we can try to raise millions too, but then we will have to put that money in those platforms that we don't really like, that are not as ethical as we want them to be, and that we most certainly wouldn't want to support, actually. So instead of doing that, we switched away, or we actually pivoted into impact buys, which is the tag behind Project Cece. And then instead of competing with our competitors, we can now collaborate with them through the Impact Bytes platform. Because what Impact Bytes basically does is it connects the tech from Project Cece to other publishers too. So brands can set up partnerships with other platforms through the platform as well.
That is so interesting. I think that's a key differentiation between, I think Project CC came first because of the need, and then you moved into Impact Bytes, and it's so lovely as well to see how, taking sustainability and fashion away for a second, how a founder's vision of saying this is my no-go zone and this is something that is bottom line affects the strategy. And that, like you said, you could have also done a Series A and gone through the commercial route to reach the B2C audience that you would need to make Project CC a successful venture. But also you saw a great market gap for with Impact Bytes, helping them find more visibility options, and also partner with your competitors to boost their visibility, boost their sustainability story. So that's really, really impressive. But going back to that, I think you mentioned with if a consumer wants to buy a pair of jeans, redirecting them to more sustainable options, that's a certain level of consumer behavior that comes into play, that you would also need to not just predict but also gather historic information to make sure that you're making the right choices. So would you be able to share some of the insights that you have collected over the last 9-10 years with your venture in terms of what consumers actually want to know when they're shopping sustainably? And does it look the same? Does it look different to different people? How do you know what people want when it comes to sustainability?
I think that's a very a question that has multiple answers and a lot of layers to it. But to make it a bit more concise, I can relate it back to our experience. So of course, when we set up those campaigns, we did a lot of testing on, okay, what are the type of people we want to reach. So we created different types of personas, and I think at some point there were two who were doing really, really well. So on the one hand, we had the Norse, which is our co-founder, or third co-founder, and internally we describe her as like the hippie. Like, she's a passionate vegan, very much, very, very well educated on like what sustainability is, and very strict in what she means with sustainability. And then on the other hand, you had the Melissas, which is me, and we basically we really like shopping, and we just want like a platform where we can see like, oh, this is a product I like, and then have enough checkboxes to see, okay, and it's also from a brand that I actually align with. So we did a lot of tests there on which consumer or which persona was actually more interesting for us. And yeah, not surprisingly maybe, but it turned out that the Norse were really, really interested in the information we provided. So they would spend a lot of time on our website and read a lot of our blogs, subscribe to the newsletter. But when it comes to shopping, they wouldn't show up as much. Whereas the Melissas, we would come in.
We would go in.
Then, maybe create an account for like to have some save for favorites. But yeah, we convert way faster than the Norse. And I think that's something we're seeing in the fashion industry in general. So I think a lot of people who are very much aligned with sustainability, they don't want to shop as often. Like they are aware of the dopamine chase that you are stuck in if you're like used to shopping fast fashion. So we know that people with sustainability, with a very strong alignment with sustainability, don't shop as often. But then there's so many people out there who do still shop quite a lot, but they also want to shop more sustainably. Like they want to do it a bit better. So I would say the Melissas. And for them, I think it's become quite tough to make switches that are actually sustainable. So because right now every brand has something to say about sustainability, like even Boohoo, even Shein, they all have their sustainability pages, and if you read it, it looks quite good. So I think if I had to start now with my sustainability journey, I would find it very, very hard to convince myself, like, okay, maybe if I invest in smaller brands, even though they are a bit more pricey, they are way better in terms of ethics than the Shein and the Boohoo's. Because right now, the stories seem so similar. So I think that's something I'm a bit scared about.
And that's such a good answer as well, because you guys as co-founders clearly are the key personas to your. So it's very, you don't have to do any market research. It's just the three of you. I love it.
We did do a lot of market research, obviously, but it came like actually someone else did that for us, and then he came back, and then while he was describing this to us, we were like, "Oh, that's so Nor," and then, "Oh, that's so Melissa."
I love that. No, that's so nice, and that also shows that. Again, it goes back to the origin story that you guys created it for yourself, and it's a lovely story as well. And I think one thing that I picked up on when you said is, everybody has a sustainability page and a sustainability claim now, and especially in fashion, that's the reason why it's resulted in so much greenwashing, so much mistrust in the industry. And I saw in an article the other day that consumers are now going through this green fatigue, where they almost have so much information thrown at them that they don't know what's true and what's not. And I think the difference to maybe when you started back, in 9-10 years ago with Project Cece, was marketing over the last few years sustainability has unfortunately been used as a marketing ploy because it's not been regulated, especially in the fashion industry. However, now as we're moving forward into more regulatory standards being put in place, especially in the European Union, we're seeing a big shift in the number of claims going down and the amount of truth rising. So I guess that was my next question, is with industry regulations changing, how do you see regulations like the Green Claims Directive reshaping the space, and what do you predict for the future when it comes to regulations in the fashion industry?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, when we started out, there was always the discussion, like a lot of feedback we also heard when we talked about launching our platform, was that a lot of people were like, no, but it's not on the consumers to make a change. It's like we need regulations. We need regulations first, and then then for the regulations, people were pointing to businesses. So there was always like this triangle where consumers were saying like, okay, consumers were pointing to businesses to make a change first, and then businesses were pointing to regulations to make a change first. And I think that's something we have been asking for quite a long time. Like, we need regulations in terms of sustainability because we need a level playing field for all the brands that are out there. So when the European Union started picking up on regulations, we were actually super excited on that they're actually going for it. And there's a lot of politicians that are doing really, really good stuff, like Lara Wolters from the Netherlands. She's a true icon here in pushing for more regulations and more responsibility in businesses. But if you look at the regulations that are currently being being put out, I feel like there's a lot of harm being done as well. Mm-hmm. So over the last years, what we've seen was that, for example, with the Green Claims Directive, there was of course the huge reversal or revision, which was very tough for smaller brands because we spend a lot of time investigating and trying to keep up with what is happening in terms of regulations, and then the EU just keeps on doing U-turns. So it's very hard to know the current status and how you need to prepare and what exactly you need to prepare and if it even aligns to you. So I think that's one thing that we've seen that's actually harming smaller brands a lot, because bigger brands, of course, they can just hire consultants or lawyers to work with, but for smaller brands, they don't have the budgets to do so. So they actually have to invest time, but they already had like so small teams with limited time. So that's something we've been seeing over the past years. And then the second thing is that with these green claims directives, like the way the legislation is now formulated, it sometimes favors very counterintuitively. Mm-hmm. So, for example, you had the product environmental framework where you were supposed to base your environmental claims on, and then it ranked polyester way above like wool and cotton and any of the natural materials. So that was also like, it's a good thing that we have this unified standard, so we all play according to the same rules. But then if you look at how these standards are being created, it doesn't seem as accurate, and it doesn't seem to encourage more environmental friendly materials. So, for example, if you rank polyester higher than any of the natural materials, there's very little incentive for brands to move away from it. And I think by investing in more sustainable alternatives, like there's so much out there, like there's so much innovation, and I think setting it up like this, it's just missing the boat, and even maybe helping greenwashing. Brands,
I agree with that entirely. I think one of the things is, fashion is always seen as a second tier industry, especially when it comes to regulations. This would never happen in food tech. This would never happen in health tech.
No.
But I think also more and more there's more information around the fact that actually microplastics in your garments can actually cause health issues going forward. And it's something that you have to be very careful about, the type of dyes that are used in production. And as I think, fortunately or unfortunately, as more ties are being discovered between the tier of fashion and the tier of health and med tech, it's becoming more and more urgent to solve this issue. And I'm a personal believer that regulations and fear is the first step for ensuring health and safety in general. But I hopefully, like you mentioned, that will push the brands and push the industry to do right. But it's also, like you said, with so many changing regulations all the time, it's difficult for brands to keep up, especially the small to medium brands. And then the legitimacy of it also is then questioned, right?
Yeah, definitely. And also I think it's not only posing a problem for small and medium brands, but also for platforms like ours. Like, for example, with the Green Claims Directive, we are not able to say things like eco-friendly or sustainable, and all these words anymore unless you provide the information on the same page. So it means a big overhaul to our business on like how we are framing our stories, which is it comes down to a lot of extra work that you put on platforms that had the intention to actually help the fashion industry become more transparent. And I think there's very little help from the from parties who have the knowledge in house or who are creating this legislation. So I think that's definitely a missed opportunity, and I see a lot of platforms like ours, but also like smaller brands struggling with that, and especially over the past years, it's been quite tough. After COVID, like we had a lot of the supply chain disruptions, and then the import tariffs, and then Brexit, and there were so many things affecting business as usual. And of course, business, that's how it's supposed to be. I think the world is never smooth sailing. But we do see a lot of brands who have been in the industry for quite a long time who are now like, okay, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. So I'm curious to see like what will happen with the void that they leave in this industry. And on the bright side, I do see a lot of small brands, like very local brands pop up, and I think that's super interesting that we're now switching back to more local production, which is also could be a really cool thing.
And it's easier to trace, right? So actually from a compliance standpoint, it becomes a lot more, you can trust their word because there's normally one or two people in the team taking care of the supply, and there's normally one or two suppliers or
definitely.
Amazing. I have two final questions for you, and this is kind of forward thinking, like you mentioned around, Impact Bytes being a host technically for multiple of your competitors to collaborate to ensure that, the fashion tech sustainability space is not gatekeeped towards brands and to consumers. So speaking of collaboration, how do you think that platforms like Impact Bytes and Habitsust can work together to create new standards where the whole industry can trust both brands and consumers?
I think that's a really good question, because I think what we've seen over the past years is that, okay, so maybe some background before I dive into this, but I have a background in business, so I studied that in university, and what I've seen in sustainable fashion is that there's competition, but there's also a lot of goodwill amongst all the operators in the industry. So there's a lot of willingness to share stories, to share experience, to share resources on how to grow together. And I think that's super interesting on like working in sustainable fashion versus in regular fashion. And in terms of how platforms like ours could collaborate and how that adds to that, is that I think it adds, like, having these multiple layers of research being done in supply chains and having multiple people look at all these different types of data points, that really helps to get the conversation going on, like, okay, but is this sustainable? And like, it really also helps to up the standard of sustainability in fashion, because during those conversations you often encounter, like, oh, maybe, like, I see you flag this as sustainable, but then why? And you have these conversations, and you notice that there's a lot of gray area in it. So I think setting up these collaborations really helps to to create even stricter standards, or not standards because it's not yet the standard, unfortunately, but creates stricter or more trustworthy data points, I would say.
And brands can trust more with more collaborators in this space. I think brands can also trust that the guidelines have been double checked and cross checked between different providers. yeah, so as we're entering this collaboration with Habitats and Impact Bites, I think it's something that, you know, we can offer to your brands, and your brands as well can benefit from the rigorous metric and rubric calculations that we do perform in the back end to ensure that they are regulation ready. Fingers crossed. But yeah, really, really exciting. And last question, sorry, and I will let you go and have a nice cup of coffee. But it's on a more personal note. I think there are so many, you know, so many female founders, so many solo founders, group founders. I think it's a bit more of a personal question to you, who's done this for almost 10 years now. There must be so many lessons and takeaways along the way that you could probably write a book. But I would ask you, you know, what's one thing you wish more founders knew about building ethical tech?
I think the lesson that we learned is to don't undercut yourself. And I think I don't want to say this to every founder, because I feel there's two type of founders. So you have, on the one hand, you have people who really want to be a founder for the personal brand, and you have people who want to be a founder because they felt like there's a better way to do something and they want to be part of the solution. And I think especially the second type of founder, is when you go out to the VC world and try to raise money, that they tend to scale down their solutions, or scale down their ambition. And I think, especially in Europe, of course, compared to the States, it's such a difference on how big we dare to dream. And I think if more people who have a sincere connection to solving real world problems, that if they don't scale down on their ambition, that they can actually, like, the impact we can have can be, we can reach it way faster than what is happening now. Because we see a lot of really, really, really good solutions being stuck on the fundraising process, and so many founders who spend so much time on fundraising, whereas I think like being very bold will definitely help shorten that process. And then like there's a saying, like, if you reach for the moon, you'll land on the stars. And I think that's something that definitely a lot of European founders can try for.
Amazing. That's such a good piece of advice. Really, really appreciate that. Especially, I guess, when we were fundraising at the start, because regulations are changing, and I'm sure it was kind of similar for you when you were fundraising. You don't undersell the technology, but you oversell the risks of changing regulations. So, which is important to do, but I think it's really important to also say that this is a bit of a journey, and to be quite confident in what you've produced, and that does solve a real need. So now that's super, super helpful. Thank you so much, Melissa. Really appreciate your time, your energy, and really appreciate you taking the time really to spend with us at Habitats, and for making such a positive impact in the fashion tech world. So thank you so, so much.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited to see, like, this early process of Habitats and where it will go to. I think it's super exciting to be
amazing, and we're looking forward to our collaboration as well. So that's going to be amazing. So thank you, really, really appreciate it, and have a great Christmas.
Yeah, thanks so much. You too.
Perfect.